Welcome back to the next baseline. I'm Danny DeJesus, founder of Elevatus Coaching and host of this podcast. This show is about transformational resilience and the real work of building a new standard for life when the old one no longer fits or is working. In the first episode, which was the pilot, I introduced the core idea behind this podcast. And that was when life changes in a way that cannot simply be undone, the question is no longer, how do I get back? But rather, the question then becomes, what do I build now? And that is exactly why I feel this episode matters. Because when you're living through disruption or a period of transition, you need more than encouragement. You need a framework. At least I think a framework is valuable. You need language for what is happening. You need a way to understand the process so you can move with more clarity instead of just reacting your way through a hard season. And that is where C2R2E comes in. And what C2R2E stands for is collapse, confrontation, realignment, reclamation, and elevation. So this is the framework that I developed. It's proprietary to help make sense of what transformation actually looks like after disruption or some major transition in life. So none about this is theory. This is not a motivational slogan, but this is a practical way to understand what happens when life changes, especially unexpectedly, when the old structure stops working and you have to build from a different level of truth or a different reality from what you thought. So this can show up in several places. It can show up in divorce. For those single parents out there, it can show up in your co-parenting. It can show up in your professional setting, like leadership, career changes. It can show up in burnout, identity shifts, and health wake-up points when things about your health need improvement. And so anytime life exposes that the old way of operating is no longer sustainable, you are dealing with the kind of pressure this framework was built and designed to help explain. And one of the most important things to understand is this: disruption does not just test you, it actually changes you. And that is why transformational resilience matters. Transformational resilience is not about trying to become who you were before everything changed. It is about recognizing that the disruption changed you. And now the work is to build from what that experience actually revealed to you. So in this episode, I want to walk you through the 5 stages of C2R2E, what they mean, what they look like in real life, and why understanding these stages can help you make better decisions when life stops feeling familiar. So let's start with the first stage. Let's start with this concept of collapse. Now, collapse is the point where the old structure stops working. It stops functioning the way that we thought it should function. Something breaks down, something ends, something becomes unsustainable, something that used to work no longer works the way it once did. And sometimes collapse can be obvious. It could be a divorce, a failed relationship, a job loss, burnout, a major conflict, a health issue, a parenting dynamic that begins breaking when there's pressure involved. And then other times, collapse can be quieter as well. You realize that the life you have been maintaining no longer feels aligned. You also realize that the role you have been playing is also draining you. You realize your current structure may still look functional from the outside, but internally it's no longer sustainable. So collapse matter because it exposes your reality. It shows you where the cracks were. It shows you what was weak. It shows you what you were tolerating. It also shows you what was being held together by habit, denial, avoidance, or force. And so that is why collapse feels or can feel so disorientating. It is not only that something has changed, it is that something true has been revealed. And that truth can hurt. A lot of times it often does. But here's the thing. A lot of people try to rush past collapse. They try to minimize it. They deny it. They distract themselves. They make impulsive decisions because they want relief more than clarity, or they become fixated on trying to get back to the old version of life instead of understanding what the disruption is actually showing them. But collapse has a function. It has a purpose. It forces truth into the view. It forces you to have to confront it, and I'll get to that step next in a moment. So what I want to highlight here are several things that pertain to collapse. One, if a relationship has ended, I want you to know that matters. If something that you're used to, a habit or routine, is failing, that matters. In your professional life, if your leadership approach or your professional life is no longer effective or no longer working the way you thought, that matters. If your co-parenting dynamic for those single parents that keeps breaking down and there's constant conflict because it was built on assumptions instead of structure, I want to tell you that matters too. And if your body is telling you something has to change because you're getting symptoms, I want to tell you that matters. Here's the thing, collapse, as I already mentioned, is going to be painful, but it's also clarifying. And before you can build anything new, you have to be honest about what is no longer working for you. And that leads into stage 2, which is confrontation. Now, confrontation is where you face what the collapse revealed. This is where the work gets more personal because now it is not only about what happened around you, it is also about what needs to be faced within yourself. Your patterns, your habits, your avoidance, your assumptions, your blind spots, your boundaries, your reactions, your role in what comes next. Confrontation is where the question changes from why did this happen to something more like, what is this situation showing me? What is being revealed to me? And that is an important shift, I want to point out, because without confrontation, people get stuck in repeating these never-ending loops of cycles. They change jobs. You could change job, but still keep the same habits. You can leave a relationship, but keep the same unexamined patterns. You can rewrite, for example, a parenting plan in a co-parenting situation, but without addressing the weak structure and the vague expectations that cause conflict in the first place. That's bound to fail too. People say they want change, but never. But at the end of the day, never really face the behaviors or the decisions that made change necessary. Confrontation is not about blaming yourself for everything, so I don't want you to take all the blame. But it's also about taking responsibility for what is yours, and that is the major difference. This stage requires honesty, brutal honesty. It asks you to look at your life without distortion. It asks you to stop protecting yourself with excuses that may have once helped you cope but no longer help you grow. It asks you to notice where your emotions are valid, but where they may also be preventing clearer thinking. Confrontation may sound something like this. I need to admit that I have been tolerating things I should have addressed earlier. I need to admit that I have been hoping structure would appear without me creating it. I need to admit that I have been functioning in reaction more than intention. I need to admit that I have been waiting for clarity while avoiding the decisions that would actually create clarity. And that is confrontation. And this is where many people get stuck because confrontation removes the comfort of confusion. Once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. You can't go back and you can't unsee it. Once you name the pattern, you have to decide. You have the responsibility to decide whether you're going to keep living inside of it or something's going to change. And here's the thing. Confrontation is also where personal agency starts to come back. Because when you face the truth, when you face the honest reality, you can begin to respond to it more intentionally. And that brings us to stage 3, which is realignment. Realignment is where you begin reorganizing your life around what is true right now. This is where the framework starts becoming constructive. Collapse showed you what broke down. Confrontation forced you to face what was revealed. And now realignment asks you, it is to face the beginning in a way that you're going to build forward from the position of truth. This is a stage about adjustment. It is about reorganizing your life so that it matches the reality of your current situation instead of old expectations. That may mean changing your routines. It may mean changing your boundaries. It may mean changing the way you communicate. It may mean changing what you give time to, what you tolerate, what you say yes to, and what you stop carrying or saying no to. Realignment matters because a lot of people try to build a new life from an old way of being or an old way of living. They say they want peace, but keep patterns that create chaos. They say they want clarity, but never make time to think. They say they want better co-parenting for those single parents, but keep relying on verbal assumptions instead of written structure, documented communication, or clearly defined expectations. They say they want professional growth, but keep using time, energy, and focus the same way they did when they were just surviving or getting by. Realignment means your choices start matching exactly what you say to achieve what it is that you want. So there needs to be a realignment. Your actions need to align with what you want. It is not dramatic. It is not flashy. It often is a lot of quiet work, and a lot of times it's boring. But it is powerful work because it is where your new baseline starts to become visible. And this is where systems matter. You may need a better weekly rhythm. You may need a clearer communication standard. You may need stronger filters for what gets your energy allocated to. You may need a more realistic schedule. You may need more structure around parenting, leadership, work, or your health. You may need to stop building your life around reaction and start building it around what actually supports clarity, consistency, and actual follow through. And that is realignment in a nutshell. So it is the process of creating order that fits the truth of your current life, what you're living in the now, in the present. And when you do that, we can move to stage 4, which is reclamation. Now, reclamation is where you begin to take back what got buried, what got scattered, neglected, or handed away during disruption. You're reclaiming parts of yourself that have been lost along the way. This is where people often begin to feel a real sense of a return of personal agency. Reclamation is not about pretending nothing happened. It is not about becoming someone completely different overnight. Rather, it is about recovering what matters and bringing it back under intentional and deliberate ownership. You are that owner. And that might be your voice, your confidence, your discipline, your standards, your health, your time, your sense of identity. And here's the thing. Disruption has quite the way of fragmenting people because you can get pulled into survival mode. You can become defined by the crisis if you choose to. You can lose sight of what actually matters. You stop trusting your own judgment. And you also adapt around instability, crisis, and you do this for so long that instability and crisis start to feel normal. And reclamation, I want to tell you, interrupts that loop. It says, I am taking responsibility for my life again. It says, I am going to keep organizing myself. I apologize. It says, I am not going to keep organizing myself around chaos. It says, I have learned too much to keep living the same way. So in practical terms, reclamation can look like this. You stop negotiating with patterns that keep you hurting. You become more serious and deliberate about how you leverage your time because you realize scattered living has been costing you clarity. You rebuild your health because you understand your body has been carrying more than you admitted to. You stop over explaining your boundaries to people who benefit from you not having any. You stop waiting to feel fully confident before acting and start rebuilding trust in yourself through consistent follow through. Take consistent action. You create a more intentional co-parenting structure because you realize hope is not a system. And those are examples of reclamation. It is where you begin taking back what disruption either exposed, disrupted, or pushed into the background. And now we reach stage 5, elevation. This is where I get pretty excited because elevation is where the new standard, your new operating standard, becomes real. This is not just about relief. This is not just about surviving. It is not just about getting through something hard, difficult, or challenging. What elevation is, it is when the work you have done begins to show up as a higher level of function, awareness, discipline, and integrity in the way you live. You make decisions differently. You see patterns faster. You recover from disruption differently. You communicate with more clarity. You tolerate less confusion. You respect structure more. You recognize that peace is often built through design and not luck. It is not by chance that you're going to get peace. Elevation does not mean life become easy, though. It means you become more grounded inside reality. And that is a very important distinction because a lot of people think growth means becoming unaffected by difficulty, and that's not true. That is not how I see it because growth means you stop being ruled by the same patterns, the same blind spots, the same weak systems, and the same identity limitations that once kept you stuck. You become, in fact, more capable of building from the truth, and that is elevation. And I think this is the part that matters a lot to me because the goal of C2R2E is not to help people return to the previous version of life at all costs. Rather, the goal is to help people build something better, something more honest, more stable, more intentional, and more aligned with what they now understand. And that is what elevation represents. So let's answer this question. How can this framework that I'm giving you on C2R2E work in real life? So as you heard those 5 stages and you internalize it, you may be thinking, okay, that may make sense, but real life usually does not unfold that neatly. And that is true. Okay, I want to validate that. That is true. Life is not linear. So one of the most important things to understand about C2R2E is that it is not a perfectly linear process. It is not a checklist where you just complete one stage and move cleanly into the next and never revisit what came before it. Real life is usually more layered than that. You might be in realignment in one area of your life today while dealing with the confrontation in another. You might be making progress professionally while still working through collapse in a personal area of your life. You might think you have moved into reclamation only to hit a new challenge that forces deeper honesty and brings you back into confrontation. Now, this does not mean you're failing, but what it does mean is that you are a real life human being, and real transformation often unfolds in layers over time. And that is why C2R2E is not meant to trap you inside a rigid sequence. It is meant to help you make sense of the work that you have to do that is waiting for you, that is available right in front of you to do and get after. C2R2E is going to give you language for your season. It's going to equip you with perspective on your progress. You're going to actually be able to measure your progress and where you are at any given point in time. And it's also going to help you stop misreading the process. Because when people do not have a language, and this is strictly my opinion, for what they are living through, they often judge themselves too quickly and too harshly. They think they are behind when they're actually confronting something important. They think they are failing when they are actually realigning. They think they should feel stronger already when they are still in the middle of reclaiming what disruption took from them. And that framework, C2R2E, gives real language to the process of transformation and life transition. And I think language matters because language helps people think clearly. Clear thinking and clarity leads to better decisions. Better decisions also help to build a stronger baseline. So I'm going to ask you this question, and you're going to take some time, and I ask that you take some time to explore this. But what stage of C2R2E are you in? So if you're listening right now, I would like for you to think about your own life honestly. Maybe you're in collapse today, and the real work is admitting that something has truly changed. Maybe you are in confrontation, and the real work is facing what that change has actually revealed to you. Maybe you are in a season of realignment, and the next step is not more insight, but better structure. Maybe you are in a moment of reclamation, and it is time to take back your standards, your health, your time, your confidence, and your voice. Maybe you are possibly in elevation, and now the challenge is to protect what you have built and keep living in alignment with it. None of these stages I'm going to tell you makes you weak. None of these stages mean that you're late. None of these stages mean that you're broken. What this is simply telling you, it is the kind of work this season is asking from you. And I think that this is one of the most useful shifts a person can make. Not asking, why am I not over this yet? Why am I not over this challenge yet? And that could be anything. Job loss, breakup. You can go down the list of things that we encounter as human beings in our everyday life. But what this framework does ask is, and highlight, is what stage are you in? And what does this stage require of you? And that is a much more useful question, I think. So before I close this episode, I have an exercise for you. In fact, in every podcast episode, I'm going to do my best to always include a reflection type of exercise for you. So before I close, I want to give you the simple exercise you can use right now. If you're driving or doing something else, I'm going to ask that you come back to this later. But if you can, take out your phone or and open a notes app or grab a piece of paper, something that you can write in. And I want you to work through these 5 questions. First, what in your life has clearly stopped working for you? That's your moment of collapse. Your second question here is, what truth have you been avoiding, minimizing, or delaying? And that's your moment of confrontation. Third, what in your life right now needs to be realigned with current reality and not old expectations? And that is your moment of realignment. Fourth, what do you need to reclaim that got buried before and during the disruption? That might be your time, your health, your voice, your standards, your confidence, or your sense of direction. And that is your moment to reclaim. And last but not least, fifth, elevation. What would elevation actually look like for you in your life over the next 90 days? Not something perfect, not a fantasy, but a real standard, a real shift, a real picture of what better looks like for you. And it can be small, or it could be as big as you want it to be. But the one thing I ask is that it is grounded in reality. Now, here's the thing. Once you answer those 5 questions, I want you to do one more thing for me. Circle the stage that feels the most true for you right now. Not the stage you wish you were in, not the stage that sounds the strongest, the stage that honestly describes where you are right now. Then ask yourself, what does the stage require from you next? What does this stage require of me? So if you're in collapse, maybe that next step is honesty. If you're in confrontation, maybe the next step is ownership, taking ownership. If you are in a moment of realignment, maybe the next step is formulating structure. If you are in reclamation, maybe the next step for you is consistency. And if you find yourself in elevation, congratulations. And maybe the next step is actually protecting what you've built. Now, I'm not asking you to solve all of this all at once. All I'm asking is just identify the stage, name the work that you have to do, and then take the next step. And that is how a new baseline actually begins. And again, that's my opinion. So in closing, this has been the C2R2E Framework, Collapse, Confrontation, Realignment, Reclamation, and Elevation that I went through today. So the 5 stages is what I define as what helps to explain transformation and how it actually happens when life changes in a way that forces you to build again, whether it's expected or unexpected. So if episode 1 introduced the core idea behind this podcast, then this episode is intended to give you the framework behind it and to deep dive on that framework. Again, C2R2E. And this is a lens I will keep using as we talk about life resets, leadership, professional growth, co-parenting, identity shifts, and the real work of building your next baseline, everything that this podcast is intended to represent. So if this episode helped you in any way, make sure you subscribe and share it with someone who's trying to make sense of a disruptive season in their life. You can also learn more through Elevatus Coaching at elevatuscoach.com. The link will be in the description. So until next time, ask yourself this question. What stage am I in right now? And what would it look like to respond to that stage with more honesty, more structure, and more intention? And that is where your next baseline begins. See you next time.